$50 is not a lot of money to buy a GPU in 2018. I mean, it's not really a lot of money to buy a GPU in any year, especially if you want to game on said GPU. But right now things are especially bad, and have been since early 2017, because cryptocurrency miners are buying up new GPUs as fast as Nvidia and AMD can make the chips. That has led to scarcity and inflated prices for new cards and even high-end cards that are a few years old. If you're serious about gaming, $50 has never really been enough to get a great graphics card. But if you're a casual gamer on a tight budget, I might be able to help out. As always, you should spend most of your money on your CPU, power supply, and GPU. But if you can get a GPU capable of some casual gaming for less than $50, you're well on your way to building a gaming PC for $200. Enter the Nvidia GeForce GT 740. As a 700 series card, it's about 4 years old now, and the GT means that it was intended to be just a consumer-grade GPU when it was released. But the 740 was technically just a step below the GTX 750, which remains a popular card for lightweight gaming to this day. And when you can sometimes find them new for around $50, they're worth considering. What you're seeing here is a GT 740 with 2 gigs of GDDR5 VRAM from Galaxy, a Chinese company. Now you might be understandably hesitant to buy a GPU that doesn't come from a familiar brand like EVGA or MSI. Galaxy has been making Nvidia GPUs since the 200 series GeForce cards though, and their track record is actually pretty good. One interesting feature of this particular GT 740 is the presence of a 6-pin power connector. A card as low-powered as the 740 will usually just be powered off of the PCIe slot, but the 6-pin power added to that means that this particular 740 should support higher, more stable overclocks if you so desire. For my testing today, I'll be leaving the card at its stock clock speed of 1059 MHz. The system I'm testing the GT 740 with is in fact the kind of system you should be able to put together for less than $200. The motherboard is a used micro ATX board from Gigabyte. It's powered by a Pentium G3258 dual-core chip, and is sitting pretty with 8 gigs of mismatched DDR3 RAM. The power supply came from an older OEM workstation, which should carry some reliability along with the odd cable lengths. The hard drive was pulled from the same workstation as the power supply, and the case is obviously a priceless work of art. But that's not super important, just get whatever case is cheap and reasonably open inside. Right off the bat, the 740 posts reasonably impressive scores in 3D Mark's range of test suites, even managing comfortable frame rates throughout the Skydiver test, meaning that most modern games should be playable in some form. The 740's processor architecture does technically support DirectX 12, meaning that it's technically capable of running the TimeSpy benchmark. That having been said, it doesn't score particularly well, just barely managing a graphics score of 547. This score does mean that DirectX 12 games will actually load, however, and that means you might be able to find a combination of lower resolutions and lower settings that will make them playable. Now, how does that translate into actual performance? We'll start in 2016's LEGO Star Wars The Force Awakens, which in this test represents all of the newer games that were designed to run on last-gen consoles and operating systems. At 1080p with high settings, the game is more than just playable, running smoothly and looking great under pretty much every circumstance. Average frame rates were a solid 76 FPS with a low of just 43 and a maximum over 200. That's great news for people that want to play LEGO games, but also for people who want to play games like League of Legends and Dota 2, where you should expect similar or even better performance. The GT 740 should chew through pretty much any MOBA or real-time strategy game without any trouble at all, assuming your CPU can keep up. Overwatch isn't the most graphically challenging game out there, but it does look good, and crucially it relies on quick reflexes, and the gameplay experience suffers from any kind of stutter introduced by underperforming hardware or network latency. At 1080p and the high graphics preset, the game averages a nicely playable 53 FPS with a low of 36 and a max of 186. These are exceptionally playable frame rates for casual play, and if you don't have a nice high refresh rate monitor, you won't benefit as much from frames above 60 FPS anyways. I'd probably opt for the medium graphics preset to bring those frame rates up a little further, but as long as you're not seriously gunning for the Overwatch League, the GT 740 will cover you in this game. That should translate to fairly good performance in most esports-centric titles and older AAA games. Rise of the Tomb Raider launched for PC in 2016, a year after launching on console, and was by far one of the prettiest games of that year. It's probably fair to say that you shouldn't expect the game to run as well on a $200 PC as it did on consoles that cost twice that amount when they were new. But at 1080p on the lowest graphical preset, the game maintains really respectable frame rates. Running in DirectX 12, the $50 GT 740 manages to keep the average frame rates up at 31 FPS, with a low of 11 and a high of 51, resulting in a surprisingly playable experience. This is probably a hair slower and choppier than you'd want if you were playing competitive first-person shooters from the past few years, but if you're just looking for a low-fidelity casual experience on recent single-player or cooperative AAA titles, you can probably manage that with this card. We'll finish off with Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, for no other reason than it takes less time to download than Hitman or Gears of War 4. I would personally go so far as to say that Hellblade is the best game of 2017, and no small part of that is how visually stunning it is. The game has AAA visuals, and as a result, it's also got AAA hardware requirements, specifically calling out the GTX 770 as the minimum recommended Nvidia graphics card. And while the GT 740 is from the same generation, it's so much less powerful than the 770 that this kinda seems hopeless going in. That having been said, well, the 740 is a champ. At 1080p with the graphics on the medium preset, Hellblade managed to keep an average frame rate close to 30 FPS, which for a third-person game with very deliberate combat like this is definitely playable. There were lows down into the teens, but frankly considering the recommended specs, I'm amazed the GT 740 performed as well as it did at all. Sure, the visuals aren't as stunning as they really could be, but these numbers should translate into a playable experience on just about any current game, as long as you're okay with dropping your graphic settings down pretty low sometimes. For what I would call a placeholder card, that's pretty darn impressive. So the takeaway is that yes, you can play most games on a low-end graphics card like a GT 740. The larger takeaway is that you can do casual gaming on a sub $200 system without limiting yourself exclusively to games that are at least 5 years old or anything like that. PC gaming can be very expensive if you want it to be and you have the money, but it doesn't have to be, even with graphics card prices as stupid as they are at the moment.